I really believe that a lot of women just want to date themselves.
He ain't lying.
That's it. They go to therapy and drag us there as men because they want to transform us into a male version of themselves.
Yep.
I cracked the code. Women will never be happy unless they are dating a male version of themselves. Have you ever been to therapy? Put a 1 in the chat if you've been. Haven't you noticed that therapy is more so geared toward women than men?
Yep.
Haven't you noticed that the woman gets all the praise while the man gets all the shame, insults, and guilt?
He ain't lying.
Haven't you noticed that when couples go to therapy, more often than not, it's the woman that wants to go and the man who doesn't want to go? Have you ever been in therapy with your spouse, constantly getting berated and invalidated and pushed to the side? I'm here to tell you that I understand. And in today's video, we're going to discuss what all men have already figured out, but nobody could put their finger on it. Why is therapy the way that it is? Why don't men want to go to therapy? But before we get into that video, don't forget, hit that like, subscribe to the channel. It helps the algorithm and it helps the channel grow.
Hit it, hit it, hit it, hit it, get it, get it, get it, get it. Ow, ow.
And so you told me about what brought you to the space of therapy. What brought you to this space? And you said you were consuming this. Were you what problems were you seeing a nexus between what you were dealing with therapeutically and what you were seeing in the dating market? How did you flesh that out for us?
Yeah, the starting point was very, very early in my therapeutic trainings. I was starting to learn and observe some of the things that seemed to lean a little bit more feminine in nature in terms of confrontation, in terms of unconditional positive regard, just certain strategies and techniques that did very well with women. They wanted it, which explained why so many of them would opt to jump into therapy and want to drag their boyfriends or husbands along with them, because it leans so heavily into kind of how their communication styles tended to function in terms of how they processed information, in terms of how they would communicate about it. And I would notice this steep decline or a lack of interest in a lot of men to really, even men that kind of start off with it, they very, very quickly would be like, this isn't it. I don't like it. And I was, at the time I felt it and I sensed it, but I couldn't quite understand exactly what was going on. And then when I started watching the manosphere type information, it all started to make sense.
I remember when I would go to therapy, I went to couples therapy at one point in my life, and I noticed that when it came to my partner was understood. But when it came to me, I was always the bad guy. I was always doing something wrong. I was always the one who didn't get it. I wasn't doing something right. And there's men watching this video that understand. Therapy is a game that is rigged against men, even from a clinical perspective, because I'm glad Jeff St. James is breaking all of this down. Because when we look at the clinical practice of therapy, therapy itself is more geared toward women than it is toward men.
Yep.
And if you're engaging in something that is more geared toward women, what happens? You have to learn how to think, act, and process information like a woman.
And the holes that I was noticing in the clinical practice, it was starting to make and fill the gaps and voids where there, in my field in particular, we have what's called evidence-based approaches, and then we have something called cultural considerations. And this is where you make adaptations to the person or individual population that you're serving. I noticed that they would do all of these culturally sensitive things for the LGBTQ population, for women, for this race or that race, handicapped people. It was all these unique things that was like seen as important that we had to curate our therapy and our approach to kind of acknowledge each said group. And there wasn't one for men. And it took me a while to be like, wow, like I've been in the field for a minute and thousands of trainings, tens of thousands of hours, and I don't recall a single thing ever being specific for men. And then when I started to watch the manosphere related stuff, it made sense. And I was like, wow. So there's a whole host of men who felt like therapy wasn't for them. And I started kind of modifying and acknowledging that, oh, well, the bias seems to be more what women tend to want, what women prefer. And if she's the initiator in bringing and starting these therapy sessions with her partner, the clinician is put in a strange position where if I have to choose between person A that wants the therapy and person B who's kind of, I don't really know if I want this, or flat out, I don't even want therapy, who would they be trying to keep happy? The one who's initiating and wanting to obviously pay for it versus the one who's not.
And I like how he breaks that down. More often than not, it's women that initiate therapy.
Exactly.
And who are you going to keep happy? The person that wants to be there, or the person that really doesn't want to be there? More often than not, it's the woman that gets catered to. Because for one, the woman is paying. Number two, the woman is the one that wants to be there. And number three, all the woman is going to do is complain about the man all day. What he is doing wrong, what he can't do, what he doesn't want to do. He doesn't want to do this. But here's the thing. Women never stop to think, maybe I'm the problem. They never stop to think. Why do you think your man doesn't want to do the dishes? Why do you think your man is always upset every single day? Why do you think your man doesn't want to have relations with you? Why is he standoffish? Why doesn't he communicate? Maybe you're the problem.
And to observe and realize, like, if they try too hard to kind of include and recognize and see the perspective of the person who tends to be the man in terms of his view on things, all of a sudden now she doesn't want to do therapy anymore, or we need a different therapist. So I was recognizing that there was a built-in assumption, not always, but a lot of times, where the initiator assumes that the therapist is going to side with them. And then more often than not, it tended to be women. So I started to notice that pattern, and then I started playing it out with couples therapy. And when I would start to try to lean in a little bit more on what men are needing and his perspective on it, and then hoping that she can reflect it, I was noticing that these women who could have been going to therapy for years, even individually, this was the first time they're having to be asked to validate and acknowledge and see the perspective of the person they're married to. They were so used to an environment that kind of insulated their viewpoint, that kind of fostered and propped up their wants, their desires, their feelings. And the therapy session was almost like the throne, where she can kind of put at the top of the throne her feelings and emotions to kind of dictate the marriage and relationship. And the therapist will kind of like christen, this is how she feels, this is what she wants, and if we satisfy that, all is well. And it wasn't really as much about what he would need or what he would want. So, I started to peep that and notice that. And I was seeing it rampant, not just with clients that were coming in. It was also with people who were working in the field, where they would make comments and remarks, and they never really were realizing that the things that they were saying about men and how broken men were because they weren't acting and seeing things exactly like women. I do know that if I had said the same exact thing, it would be a totally different reaction. So this was a very normalized approach in a culture. It was very matriarchal in nature, feminine in nature, femme-centered in nature. And, it was a lonely experience until I realized that at this point, I think it's time to bring attention and bring light to it.
Fellas, I know we've all been in this position. We've all been there. Have you ever been in therapy and you felt like, as long as we do this, as long as we keep her happy, as long as you don't lie, as long as you don't do this, as long as you don't invalidate her feelings, as long as you don't make it all about you, if you start doing what she wants you to do, if you start listening more, if you start communicating, not the way you know how, but the way she knows how. Haven't you noticed that, fellas? Women will never be happy unless they are dating a male version of themselves. And when you understand that, fellas, life gets a lot more easier. That's why they drag us to therapy. That's why they constantly tell us you're wrong. That's why they constantly invalidate us. That's why they constantly tell us that we're wrong. Because if you aren't the person that they imagine in their heads that you are to be, you are wrong. And shout out to Mr. Jeff St. James. The video will be linked in the description to both podcasts, Dr. L and Jeff St. James. But in closing, if you've ever been to therapy, if you've ever had a bad experience in couples therapy, Christian counseling, life coaching, where you feel invalidated as a man, I want you to know that over here, we see you, we understand you, we empathize you, and we will never invalidate you. You were not wrong in your convictions, in your feelings, in your understanding of what the problem is or was in your relationship. And I want you to know over here on this channel, you have a voice. You have a voice that you can say whatever your heart desires, and you will never be invalidated. If you like the video, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, like, share, and subscribe for more content just like this.